discover the captivating life of Aimee de Heron, a Brazilian beauty who became a secret spy, fashion icon, and confidant to presidents and royalty. From her humble beginnings in rural Brazil to espionage in Nazi-occupied Europe, whirlwind romances with the Kennedys, and a jet-set existence spanning a century, this biography uncovers hidden stories of glamour, intrigue, and resilience. Dive into untold tales of World War II intelligence, high society scandals, and timeless elegance that shape history. Perfect for fans of historical figures, spy novels, and fashion history, settle in for a journey through one woman's extraordinary world. Early years in Brazil, 1903 to 1920s. Aimee de Heron was born Aimee de Sá Sotomayor on August 3, 1903, in the quiet town of Castro, in Brazil's Paraná state. Or was it 1907? Records vary, and Aimee herself loved to keep people guessing about her age. It was part of her allure, a playful veil she maintained throughout her life, adding to the enigma that surrounded her. This uncertainty about her birth year wasn't just a quirk, it became a signature element of her persona, a subtle game she played with the world, perhaps to preserve a sense of mystery in an era when women's lives were often rigidly documented and defined. In a time when birth certificates could be imprecise in rural Brazil, especially in smaller towns like Castro, such discrepancies were not uncommon. Families might delay registrations due to distance from administrative centers or simple oversight, leading to later corrections or conflicting accounts. For Aimee, this ambiguity only enhanced her later image as a worldly sophisticate, someone who transcended the mundane details of chronology. She would often smile coyly when asked, deflecting with a witty remark or a change of subject, turning what could have been a mere clerical error into a layer of intrigue that captivated friends and admirers alike. Her parents, humble school teachers, instilled in their daughters a profound thirst for knowledge and adventure from a young age. Janeiro de Sá Sotomayor and Julieta Sampaio Quintel were not wealthy landowners or influential politicians. They were educators in the truest sense, dedicated to shaping young minds in a community where literacy was still a privilege rather than a given. Janeiro, with his Portuguese roots evident in the family name, Sotomayor harking back to Iberian heritage, taught subjects like mathematics and history, drawing from his own modest upbringing to emphasize discipline and curiosity. Julieta, perhaps influenced by her Brazilian lineage, focused on languages and literature, weaving tales of far-off lands into her lessons. Together, they created a home environment where books were treasured possessions, often borrowed from local libraries or shared among neighbors. Aimee and her sister Vera would recall evenings spent around a simple wooden table lit by kerosene lamps, listening to their father recount stories of European explorers like Vasco da Gama or Christopher Columbus, whose voyages mirrored the family's distant ancestral ties. These narratives weren't just bedtime stories. They were seeds planted in fertile young minds, fostering a sense of wonder about the world beyond their small town. The parents' emphasis on adventure wasn't abstract. It manifested in small family outings to nearby rivers or forests, where the girls learned to observe nature, collect plants, and imagine themselves as intrepid discoverers. They emphasized education as the key to rising above their modest circumstances, sharing stories of pioneers, inventors, and explorers that ignited young Aimee's imagination. In Castro, a town nestled in the rolling hills of Paraná, life was far from opulent. The family's home was likely a modest wooden structure with a tiled roof, typical of the region's architecture, influenced by European settlers. Inside, The walls might have been adorned with simple maps or drawings, remnants of classroom projects brought home. Education, in this context, was more than schooling. It was a pathway to social mobility in a Brazil where class divides were stark. Janeiro and Julieta, aware of the limitations imposed by their rural setting, drilled into their daughters the value of perseverance. "Knowledge is the only inheritance we can give you," Julieta might have said, echoing the sentiments of many immigrant-descended families striving for betterment. Aimee, even as a toddler, showed signs of precociousness, learning to read early, perhaps by age 5, devouring whatever books were available from Brazilian folktales to translated European classics. Her imagination soared with tales of pioneers like the Bandeirantes, the rugged explorers who ventured into Brazil's interior in centuries past, seeking gold and glory. Inventors fascinated her too. Stories of Santos Dumont, the Brazilian aviation pioneer who was making headlines around the time of her birth with his dirigible flights in Paris, would have sparked dreams of innovation and flight. Explorers like Percy Fawcett, whose Amazon expeditions were gaining notoriety in the 1910s, added an element of danger and discovery that resonated with her budding sense of adventure. Brazil at the turn of the century was a land of stark contrasts, vast coffee plantations driving a booming economy, waves of European immigrants blending with indigenous and African cultural roots, and a society teetering on the edge of modernization. The early 1900s marked the height of the Old Republic, 1889 to 1930, a period when Brazil's economy was heavily reliant on agricultural exports, particularly coffee from states like São Paulo and Paraná. Paraná itself was a frontier of sorts, with its fertile soils attracting immigrants from Germany, Poland, Italy, and Ukraine, who brought with them traditions that enriched the local culture. In Castro, founded in 1704 as a waypoint for cattle drovers, the population hovered around a few thousand, a mix of Portuguese-Brazilian families like the Sotomayers and newer arrivals. The town's economy revolved around agriculture, coffee, yerba mate, and livestock, with small farms dotting the landscape. Aimee's childhood would have been immersed in this blend. The aroma of fresh coffee beans drying in the sun, the sound of immigrant languages mingling in the marketplace, and festivals that fused Catholic saints' days with indigenous rituals and African rhythms. Society was hierarchical, with elite fazenderos holding sway, while families like Aimee's occupied a middle ground, respected for their intellect but constrained by income. Modernization crept in slowly. The first automobiles might have appeared on dusty roads by the 1910s, and telegraphs connected Castro to larger cities, like Curitiba, the state capital. Yet contrasts abounded. While Rio de Janeiro buzzed with electric lights and trams, rural Paraná still relied on horse-drawn carts and oil lamps. The vibrant streets of nearby cities echoed with emerging samba rhythms, while underlying political tensions simmered as the old republic began to crumble under new ambitions. Though Castro was removed from the epicenters of power, the echoes of national events reached even this quiet town. The 1904 vaccine revolt in Rio, where citizens rioted against mandatory smallpox vaccinations, highlighted growing discontent with oligarchic rule. In Paraná, tensions arose from land disputes between settlers and indigenous groups, as well as labor unrest on plantations. By the 1910s, World War I's impact rippled through Brazil. As a neutral nation until 1917, it supplied food and materials to the Allies, boosting the economy but also inflating prices, which strained rural families. Aimee, as a child, might have heard her parents discuss these events over dinner, Janeiro perhaps analyzing the war's geopolitical implications, drawing parallels to Brazil's own struggles for independence. Samba, evolving from African roots in Rio's favelas, hadn't fully permeated Paraná yet, but local music like fandango and viola, caipira, filled community gatherings. Political ambitions simmered too. The rise of figures like Washington Luiz, who would become president in 1926, signaled shifts toward urbanization and industrialization. For young Aimee, these undercurrents added a layer of excitement to her worldview, blending the stability of home with the promise of change. Growing up in this dynamic environment, Aimee and her sister Vera dreamed big, envisioning lives far beyond the rural simplicity of Castro. The sisters were close, Vera perhaps the more outgoing one, but both shared a bond forged in shared adventures. Daily life in Castro was rhythmic. Mornings began with chores, fetching water from a nearby stream or helping in the garden, followed by school, where their parents taught. The local schoolhouse, a simple building with wooden benches, served children from various backgrounds, fostering early lessons in diversity. Aimee excelled, her quick wit and charm making her a favorite among peers. Afternoons were for play, exploring the pine forests surrounding Castro, climbing trees, or swimming in the Iapo River, which winds through the region. These escapades nurtured her adventurous spirit, teaching resilience and curiosity. Vera and Aimee would whisper dreams under the stars. Vera imagining marriage to a nobleman, which she later achieved. Aimee fantasizing about traveling to Paris or New York. Their family's modest means meant vacations were rare, perhaps limited to visits to relatives in Curitiba, where the sisters glimpsed urban life, bustling markets, theaters, and the first cinemas showing silent films. Their family's focus on learning became a ladder, propelling Aimee toward horizons she could scarcely imagine as a child. Education in early 20th century Brazil was uneven, with rural areas lagging behind cities, but Genesio and Julieta's dedication bridged that gap. They homeschooled supplementary lessons, introducing French and English through borrowed books, preparing their daughters for a globalizing world. By her teens, Aimee was fluent in multiple languages, a skill that would later prove invaluable in her espionage and socialite roles. The 1920s brought acceleration. Brazil's centennial independence celebrations in 1922 showcased modernism, with the Week of Modern Art in São Paulo challenging traditional norms. Though Castro was distant, news traveled via newspapers, inspiring Aimee. As teenagers, the sisters moved toward Rio, but in Castro, foundations were laid. A blend of humility, intellect, and daring. Little did they know, her path would carry her across oceans, into the heart of global drama, where her early curiosity would evolve into a lifelong pursuit of connections and discoveries. The quiet years in Castro were the crucible, shaping a woman who would charm presidents, spy on empires, and dance through history. From the coffee-scented air of Paraná to the salons of Paris, Aimee's journey began here, in simplicity that belied the extraordinary life ahead. Moved to Rio de Janeiro in Transformative Travels, 1920s. As a teenager, Aimee and her sister Vera made the pivotal move to Rio de Janeiro, the glittering capital where sun-kissed beaches met bustling ports and a sense of endless possibility. This relocation wasn't a whim, but a calculated step toward broader horizons, driven by their parents' belief that education and opportunity flourished in urban centers. In the late 1910s or early 1920s, likely around 1918 or 1919, when Aimee was about 15, Aimee and Vera bid farewell to the serene rhythms of Castro. The journey itself was an adventure, traveling by train from Paraná to São Paulo, then onward to Rio, a multi-day trek through lush landscapes dotted with coffee plantations and emerging industrial towns. Rail travel in Brazil during this era was a symbol of progress, with steam locomotives chugging along tracks laid by British engineers, offering glimpses of the nation's evolving infrastructure. For the sisters, raised in rural modesty, the trip was eye-opening, passing through bustling stations where vendors hawked fresh fruits and newspapers, and sharing compartments with fellow travelers from diverse backgrounds. Upon arrival in Rio, the contrast was staggering. From Castro's quiet dirt roads to the cacophony of Rio's central station where porters shouted and trolleys clanged, the family might have settled in a modest apartment in neighborhoods like Flamengo or Botafogo, areas accessible to the middle class, yet close to the city's vibrant core. This move represented a leap of faith, funded perhaps by savings or relative support, as Janeiro and Julieta sought better schools and prospects for their daughters. Vera, the elder sister, adapted quickly, her outgoing nature helping them navigate the new environment, while Aimee, with her introspective curiosity, absorbed the city's energy like a sponge. Rio promised reinvention, a place where dreams could take flight amid the tropical breeze. Rio in the 1920s was a whirlwind of energy, jazz influences drifting in from abroad, sleek Art Deco buildings rising against the skyline, and an elite class flaunting their wealth at opulent grand balls and seaside gatherings. Often called the Marvelous City, Rio de Janeiro pulsed with a unique blend of old-world charm and modern aspiration. The decade known as the Roaring Twenties globally manifested in Brazil as a period of cultural effervescence following World War I and the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, which had claimed thousands in the city. President Epitácio Pessoa's administration, 1919 to 1922, and later Washington Luiz, 1926 to 1930, pushed for urbanization, transforming Rio into a showcase of progress. Iconic landmarks like the Copacabana Palace Hotel, opened in 1923, epitomized luxury, drawing international visitors with its French-inspired architecture and ocean views. Beaches, such as Copacabana and Ipanema, were evolving from quiet stretches to social hubs, where flappers in daring swimsuits mingled under colorful umbrellas, influenced by Hollywood films arriving via steamships. The ports bustled with activity, cargo ships unloading European fashions, American machinery, and African spices, while immigrants from Portugal, Italy, and the Middle East added to the multicultural tapestry. Jazz imported from New Orleans via records and touring musicians, fused with local samba and speakeasies and nightclubs, creating a soundtrack of syncopated rhythms that echoed through the hills. Art Deco skyscrapers, like the Edifício à Noite, Brazil's first skyscraper in 1929, pierced the sky, symbolizing ambition amid the iconic Sugarloaf Mountain and Christ the Redeemer statue, whose construction began in 1922. The elite, coffee barons, industrialists, and foreign diplomats hosted lavish balls at venues like the Jockey Club, where gowns from Paris shimmered under chandeliers, and seaside gatherings at private villas featured fireworks and orchestras. Yet, beneath the glamour lay contrasts. Favelas climbing the Morros hills, housing the working class, highlighted social divides. Political tensions simmered too. The 1922 Modern Art Week challenged traditional aesthetics, birthing Brazilian modernism with artists like Tarsila do Amaral painting vibrant nationalist scenes. For young women like Aimee, Rio offered liberation. Suffrage movements gained traction. Women voted federally in 1932, and figures like Bertha Lutz advocated for rights, inspiring a generation to pursue education and careers. Aimee, with her striking beauty, cascading dark hair, luminous eyes that seemed to hold secrets, and an effortless grace that turned heads, quickly drew attention in these social circles. Her appearance was a blend of Brazilian warmth and European elegance, hair falling in soft waves, perhaps inherited from her Portuguese roots, framing a face with high cheekbones and expressive eyes that conveyed intelligence and mystery. In a city obsessed with beauty, where carnival queens were celebrated, Aimee stood out without trying, her natural poise making her a magnet at gatherings. Yet she wasn't satisfied with superficial admiration. Her innate curiosity pushed her to seek deeper experiences. While many young women of her class focused on marriage prospects, Aimee delved into Rio's intellectual scene. She might have enrolled in courses at the National Library or attended lectures at the Brazilian Academy of Letters, where writers like Machado de Assis' legacy inspired discussions on literature and society. Her curiosity extended to the arts, visiting theaters for plays or the emerging cinema, where silent films like those of Charlie Chaplin sparked laughter and wonder. Socially, she navigated with ease, perhaps through school friends or family connections, attending tea parties or beach outings, where conversations ranged from fashion to politics. This period honed her charm, learning to converse in multiple languages, picking up French from expatriates or English from American tourists. Her grace wasn't performative, it stemmed from genuine interest in people, asking questions that revealed hidden depths. Friends recalled her as the girl with the knowing smile, someone who listened intently, turning casual encounters into meaningful bonds. This blend of beauty and intellect set her apart, foreshadowing her future as a spy and socialite, where allure opened doors to secrets. Yet she wasn't content with mere admiration. In her early 20s, through budding connections in Rio's upper echelons, possibly tied to influential families like the Orléans Bragança, she embarked on a life-changing trip to the United States and Canada. These connections were crucial. The Orléans Bragança descendants of Brazil's imperial family maintained ties to European royalty and Brazilian elites, offering introductions that bridged classes. Aimee might have met them through social events or mutual acquaintances, her poise impressing enough to secure invitations or sponsorships. By 1924 or 1925, around age 21, she set off, perhaps sailing from Rio's port on a luxury liner like the SS Vestris, a journey of weeks across the Atlantic. Travel in the 1920s was glamorous, yet arduous. Ocean voyages featured elegant dining, deck promenades, and stops in ports like Buenos Aires or New York. Aimee, accompanied by Vera or a chaperone, would have marveled at the changing seas from tropical warmth to northern chill. Landing in New York, the city's skyscrapers, like the Woolworth Building, dwarfed Rio's emerging skyline, exposing her to jazz clubs in Harlem and Broadway shows. Venturing to Canada, perhaps by train through the scenic Northeast, she explored Toronto's bustling streets or Montreal's French-infused culture. This trip wasn't tourism, it was transformative, broadening her worldview amid Prohibition-era speakeasies and flapper fashions, igniting a passion for innovation. This journey opened doors to worlds she had only dreamed of, exposing her to innovation and intellect. In the U.S., she witnessed the automobile boom, Ford Model Ts clogging streets, and the early aviation feats, echoing Santos Dumont's legacy. Canada offered contrasts, vast landscapes and progressive ideas with women's rights advancing post-suffrage. Aimee absorbed it all, perhaps visiting museums or factories, her curiosity fueling notes in a journal. It was in Nova Scotia that she visited the estate of Alexander Graham Bell, the legendary inventor of the telephone. Bell, born in Scotland but a Canadian resident since 1885, spent his later years at Bainbridge, Gaelic for Beautiful Mountain, in Baddock, a sprawling 600-acre property overlooking Brosdor Lake. By the 1920s, Bell was in his 70s, his white beard and kindly eyes belying a mind still ablaze with ideas. The estate was a hub of experimentation. Laboratories for hydrofoil boats, tetrahedron kites for flight research, and greenhouses for plant breeding. Bell and his wife Mabel hosted young innovators, continuing his legacy from inventing the telephone in 1876 to aiding the deaf, inspired by Mabel's hearing loss. Aimé's visit, likely arranged through connections, perhaps via Brazilian diplomats or mutual friends in scientific circles, coincided with gatherings where guests discussed telephony advancements, early radio, and even eugenics, a controversial interest of Bell's. She arrived by ferry or carriage, greeted by the estate's Victorian mansion with its wraparound porches and panoramic views. Bell, in his later years, hosted gatherings of young minds at his serene Bainbridge property, where discussions flowed about technology, flight, and the future. These sessions were informal symposia around crackling fireplaces or on lakeside lawns. Participants shared prototypes and philosophies. Bell, ever the mentor, demonstrated his hydroplanes, boat-like crafts with wings for speed on water, or his massive kites, precursors to modern aviation. Aimee mingled with engineers, aviators, and thinkers, her multilingual skills shining in conversations blending English, French, and technical jargon. She absorbed it all, mingling with a circle of forward thinkers who tested hydroplanes and shared visionary ideas. Perhaps she witnessed a hydrofoil test on the lake, the craft skimming waves at thrilling speeds, or joined in debates on how telephones could connect remote communities like her native Castro. Bell's family, including daughters and grandchildren, added warmth, with Mabel offering insights on perseverance amid adversity. Bell imparted a simple yet profound piece of wisdom that would become her guiding principle. To stay young, you need to have young friends. This advice, shared perhaps during a quiet walk or over tea, resonated deeply. Bell, at 78 in 1925, embodied it, surrounding himself with youthful innovators despite his age. For Aimee, it was a revelation. In a world where women aged into prescribed roles, this encouraged lifelong vitality through connections. She cherished this encounter as a personal secret for decades, only revealing it in 2006, mere months before her passing, to a close friend who was stunned to learn her true age. In that final confession over coffee in New York, she whispered of the visit, her eyes sparkling, as if reliving the moment. Imagine carrying such a talisman, a nugget of insight from one of history's great innovators, through a lifetime of adventures, a quiet reminder to embrace youthfulness amid the passage of time. This wisdom guided her, from espionage in Paris to friendships with Kennedys. She sought young spirits defying age with grace. The trip solidified her path, blending curiosity with connections, setting the stage for a life of intrigue. Entry into politics and first marriage, 1930s. Back in Brazil, Aimée's life took a decisive political turn as the nation underwent dramatic changes. After her transformative travels in the 1920s, which had broadened her horizons and instilled a deep sense of curiosity about the world, Aimee returned to a country on the brink of transformation. The Brazil she re-entered was no longer the vibrant, but relatively stable republic of her youth. It was a nation grappling with economic turmoil, social unrest, and political disillusionment. The global Great Depression, which began with the Wall Street crash of 1929, had hit Brazil hard, exacerbating the vulnerabilities of its export-dependent economy. Coffee, the backbone of Brazilian exports, saw prices plummet, leading to widespread unemployment on plantations and financial strain for the elite. This economic crisis fueled discontent with the old republic, a system dominated by oligarchs from São Paulo and Minas Gerais, who alternated power in what was known as the coffee with milk politics. Coffee representing São Paulo's interests and milk symbolizing Minas Gerais' dairy sector. Corruption scandals, electoral fraud, and the exclusion of emerging urban middle classes and industrial workers from political influence created a powder keg of resentment. Into this volatile mix stepped Getúlio Vargas, a charismatic lawyer and politician from Rio Grande do Sul, whose rise would forever alter Brazil's trajectory, and, in turn, entwine Aimé's personal life with the corridors of power. In the 1930s, Getúlio Vargas seized power through a revolution, reshaping Brazil into a more centralized state with undertones of European authoritarianism, blending nationalism with economic reforms that captivated the public. Vargas's ascent began in earnest during the 1930 presidential election. As the governor of Rio Grande do Sul, he had already made a name for himself as a progressive leader, implementing reforms in education, agriculture, and infrastructure that appealed to a broad coalition. Nominated by the Liberal Alliance, a coalition of opposition forces from Rio Grande do Sul, Paraíba, and Minas Gerais dissidents, Vargas ran against Julio Prestes, the establishment candidate backed by incumbent President Washington Luiz. The campaign was fierce, with Vargas positioning himself as a champion of change against the corrupt oligarchy. He promised to address the coffee crisis, promote industrialization, and extend rights to workers, drawing support from urban laborers, the military's tenentista faction, young officers disillusioned with the old republic, and regional elites frustrated with São Paulo's dominance. However, the election on March 1, 1930, was marred by allegations of fraud. Prestes was declared the winner with 59% of the vote, but Vargas's supporters cried foul, claiming massive ballot stuffing and voter intimidation. Tensions escalated when on July 26, 1930, João Pessoa, Vargas's running mate and governor of Paraíba, was assassinated in Recife. Though the killing stemmed from a personal feud, it was politicized as a symbol of the regime's brutality, igniting widespread protests and calls for revolution. The Brazilian Revolution of 1930 erupted on October 3rd, starting in Rio Grande do Sul under Vargas' orchestration. Rebel forces led by figures like Oswaldo Aranha and Pedro Aurelio de Goy Monteiro quickly seized control of Porto Alegre. The uprising spread northward. In Minas Gerais, Governador Olegário Maciel joined the revolutionaries. In the northeast, Juarez Távora coordinated attacks from Paraíba. Military units defected en masse, reflecting the Tenentistas' influence and the army's dissatisfaction with the government. By mid-October, revolutionaries controlled much of the south and northeast, advancing on Rio de Janeiro. Washington Luiz, isolated in the capital, faced a naval blockade and internal betrayals. On October 24th, a military junta deposed him, placing him under house arrest at the Guanabara Palace. The junta, composed of generals Tasso Fragoso and Juan de Deus Mena Barreto, and Admiral Isaías de Noronha, assumed temperature control to prevent anarchy. Negotiations ensued, and on November 3, 1930, Vargas arrived triumphantly in Rio by train, greeted by cheering crowds. He assumed the role of provisional president, marking the end of the old republic and the dawn of the Vargas era. This revolution was relatively bloodless, fewer than 1,000 deaths, but it fundamentally shifted power from regional oligarchs to a centralized federal authority. Vargas's provisional government from 1930 to 1934 was characterized by bold reforms that centralized power and addressed the Depression's fallout. He suspended the 1891 Constitution, dissolved Congress and state legislatures, and appointed interveners to govern states, ensuring loyalty to the new regime. Economically, he tackled the coffee surplus by creating the National Coffee Department in 1933, which bought excess beans and burned millions of sacks to stabilize prices, a drastic measure that sustained the industry but symbolized state interventionism. Nationalism infused his policies. He promoted import substitution industrialization, founding institutions like the National Steel Company, though fully realized later, and encouraging Brazilian ownership of key sectors. Labor reforms were groundbreaking. The newly established Ministry of Labor, Industry, and Commerce introduced minimum wages, 8-hour workdays, and protections for women and children in factories. Immigration quotas favored Brazilians in employment, reflecting a nativist bent. Yet these reforms carried authoritarian undertones, inspired by European models like Mussolini's Italy and Salazar's Portugal. Vargas admired fascism's efficiency, incorporating corporatist structures where labor and capital were mediated by the state. Censorship crept in, and political opponents, including communists and former oligarchs, faced repression. The public, weary of the old republic's failures, largely embraced Vargas's paternalistic style. He was the father of the poor, as his reforms brought stability and hope amid global chaos. Amid this turbulence, Aimé married Luis Simões Lopes on June 7, 1932. This union was not merely a personal milestone, but a gateway into the heart of Brazil's political elite. Luis Simões Lopes, born in 1900 in Pelotas, Rio Grande do Sul, came from a prominent gaucho family with deep ties to agriculture and politics. Educated in agronomy, he had risen through bureaucratic ranks, serving as a key advisor in Vargas's state government before the revolution. His expertise in public administration made him indispensable. In 1930, Vargas appointed him chief of staff, a position he held until 1945. As chief of staff, Luis wielded immense influence, managing the president's schedule, coordinating cabinet affairs, and overseeing reforms like the creation of the Federal Council of Public Civil Service in 1938, which modernized Brazil's bureaucracy. He was a quiet operator, loyal to Vargas, and instrumental in initiatives like professional regulation for engineers and agronomists through the CONFEA system in 1933. Aimé, by then in her late 20s, had returned from her North American adventures with a worldly sophistication that complemented Luis's steady demeanor. Their courtship likely began in Rio's social circles, where Aimé's beauty and intellect drew admirers. The wedding, held in a modest ceremony amid the revolution's aftermath, symbolized stability in uncertain times. Friends described Luis as devoted, providing Aimé with security while introducing her to power's inner sanctum. Luis, as Vargas's chief of staff, was a central figure in the regime, wielding influence in the highest circles. His role extended beyond administration. He was Vargas's confidant, advising on everything from economic policy to diplomatic maneuvers. In the early 1930s, Luis helped implement the coffee valorization program and labor laws, earning a reputation as a technocrat committed to modernization. His gaucho roots aligned with Vargas's regional base, strengthening the regime's southern support. For Aimé, marriage to Luis meant immersion in this world. The couple resided at the opulent Capote Palace, the official presidential residence, which thrust Aimé directly into the corridors of power. Capote Palace, a neoclassical gem in Rio's Flamengo neighborhood, had a storied history. Built between 1858 and 1867 for the Baron of Nova Friburgo, it featured marble halls, crystal chandeliers, and lush gardens extending to Flamengo Beach. Acquired by the government in 1897, it became the presidential seat, hosting 18 presidents until 1960. In the 1930s, under Vargas, it buzzed with activity. Diplomats in tuxedos, military officers in uniforms, and intellectuals debating policy. The palace's 3 floors included grand salons for receptions, private quarters on the upper levels, and offices where decisions shaping Brazil were made. Vargas, ever the workaholic, often held late-night meetings in the library, surrounded by leather-bound books and maps of the nation. Life there was a blend of luxury and intensity, grand state dinners, whispered policy discussions, and the constant hum of political maneuvering. Imagine evenings in the Blue Room, where silverware clinked against fine china during banquets honoring foreign dignitaries, like Argentine envoys or American businessmen. Aimee, dressed in elegant gowns from Rio's ateliers, would charm guests with her multilingual wit, discussing art or travel while overhearing talks on tariffs or alliances. Mornings might involve strolls in the palace gardens, designed with French flair, palm trees, fountains, and exotic birds, offering brief respite from the intrigue. Yet intensity pervaded. Guards patrolled the grounds, telephones rang with urgent calls from intervenors, and aides like Lewis shuttled documents. The palace wasn't just a home, it was the nerve center of the provisional government, where Vargas plotted against uprisings like the 1932 Constitutionalist Revolution in São Paulo, a failed bid to restore democracy. Aimee navigated this with grace, hosting teas for ministers' wives or accompanying Luis to events, her presence adding glamour to the regime's austere image. Whispers circulated endlessly. Was she more than just the wife of an aide? Proximity to Vargas fueled speculation. The president, married to Darcy Sarmanho since 1911, was known for infidelity. His 5 children included favorites like daughter Alzira, who became his secretary. But rumors swirled about Aimee. Her beauty, intelligence, and palace residence suggested intimacy. Vargas, a short, bespectacled man with a commanding presence, was drawn to strong women, and Aimee fit the bill. Guests noted lingering glances or private conversations amplified by the palace's echoey halls. These whispers weren't baseless. Vargas's secret diaries, revealed long after his tragic suicide in 1954, spoke repeatedly of his Bem Amada, his beloved, with entries filled with longing and affection. Penned between 1932 and 1942, the diaries, published in 1995 and expanded in 2004, offer intimate glimpses. Vargas wrote of emotional turmoil, political doubts, and personal passions. Phrases like, "My beloved inspires me amid chaos," evoke deep attachment. Historians analyzing context point to Aimee. Her timeline matches, as does her discretion. In one entry from 1937 around his coup, Vargas laments separation from his Bem Amada, aligning with Aimee's later European missions. Evidence includes letters and palace logs showing frequent interactions, though no smoking gun exists. Vargas was cautious, burning sensitive papers. Many believe Aimee was this enigmatic figure, a woman who held the president's heart without ever publicly acknowledging or refuting the speculation. Supporters cite her influence. Some reforms, like women's suffrage in 1932, might reflect her progressive views from travels. Critics saw favoritism, with Luis's promotions tied to her allure. Yet Aimee remained silent, a choice reflecting her poise. She moved through this world with remarkable poise, her charm disarming even the most guarded, but it exacted a toll. The relentless scrutiny blurred the lines between her personal life and national affairs, forcing her to navigate rumors with quiet dignity while balancing loyalty and independence. Whispers followed her to salons and dinners where envious wives gossiped and journalists hinted in veiled articles. The emotional strain was profound, torn between marital fidelity, affection for Vargas, and her espionage ambitions. Isolation crept in. Friends distanced themselves amid scandals. Yet Aimee endured, her Belle-inspired youthfulness sustaining her. This period forged her resilience, preparing her for future intrigues in Paris and beyond, where personal and political would entwine even more deeply. Clandestine missions, friendships, and espionage in Europe, 1934 to 1939. By 1934, Aimée's involvement deepened into the realm of secrecy and international intrigue. Her life in Brazil, already intertwined with political power through her marriage to Luis Simões Lopes, and her proximity to President Getúlio Vargas, had prepared her for this evolution. The early 1930s had seen Brazil stabilizing under Vargas's provisional government, but global events were casting long shadows. Europe was a continent in flux, with the rise of totalitarian regimes reshaping alliances and ideologies. Adolf Hitler had become Chancellor of Germany in January 1933, consolidating power through the Enabling Act in March, which effectively dismantled the Weimar Republic and established the Nazi dictatorship. The Night of the Long Knives in June 1934 purged internal rivals like Ernst Röhm, solidifying Hitler's control over the SA and SS. Germany's rearmament violated the Treaty of Versailles, with the Luftwaffe unveiled in 1935 and troops reoccupying the Rhineland in 1936. Fascism was spreading. Benito Mussolini's Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935, and Francisco Franco's nationalists sparked the Spanish Civil War in 1936, drawing Axis support. Latin America, including Brazil, became a target for influence. Nazi propaganda flooded the region, courting German immigrant communities and economic ties. Vargas, navigating Brazil's neutral stance, needed eyes and ears in Europe to assess threats and opportunities. Aimee, with her multilingual skills, social grace, and unassuming beauty, was an ideal covert asset. Posing as an elegant socialite with a passion for fashion, a cover that allowed her to travel without suspicion, she was dispatched to Berlin in 1934 as a secret agent. In Berlin, the city was a showcase of Nazi grandeur amid underlying repression. The 1936 Olympics would later highlight this facade, but in 1934, the regime was already staging rallies at the Nuremberg grounds and promoting Aryan ideals through films like Leni Riefenstahl's works. Aimee arrived under the guise of a wealthy Brazilian heiress interested in European couture and culture, perhaps checking into luxurious hotels like the Adlon, overlooking the Brandenburg Gate. This cover was meticulously crafted. Her unlimited credit from the Brazilian government, discreet funds funneled through diplomatic channels, enabled her to frequent high society events, from opera nights at the Staatsoper to private soirees hosted by industrialists sympathetic to the Nazis. Posing as an elegant socialite with a passion for fashion, she infiltrated circles close to the Nazi regime, gathering subtle intelligence on their ambitions and ideologies. Fashion served as her entry point. Berlin's scene, though overshadowed by Paris, featured designers like Hugo Boss, who later supplied SS uniforms, and salons where wives of officials discussed politics over fittings. Aimée's fluency in multiple languages English honed from her travels, French from childhood readings, Italian from Rio's immigrant communities, and a solid command of German picked up through self-study and practice, proved invaluable, allowing her to blend seamlessly into conversations at high society events. Imagine her at a glittering reception in the Reich Chancellery Gardens, sipping champagne amid swastika banners, eavesdropping on discussions about the Nuremberg laws, which would strip Jews of citizenship in 1935. She mingled with diplomats, businessmen, and minor Nazi officials, her charm disarming them into revealing tidbits, whispers of rearmament plans, anti-Semitic policies brewing in the Gestapo headquarters, or economic overtures to South America. Her reports back to Vargas, sent via coded letters or trusted couriers, detailed the regime's expansionist ideology, including the Lebensraum concept, aiming eastward in alliances with Italy. These insights were subtle, gathered through flirtations and feigned interest rather than direct interrogation, minimizing risk in a city where the Gestapo monitored foreigners. Aimé navigated dangers carefully, avoiding overt anti-Nazi sentiments. She posed as apolitical, focusing on cultural exchanges. Yet the mission weighed on her, witnessing book burnings in 1933's aftermath or the exclusion of Jewish artists from galleries, stirred internal conflict, contrasting her Brazilian upbringing's multicultural blend. This Berlin stint, lasting perhaps months, honed her espionage skills, observation, deception, and quick adaptation, preparing her for more complex assignments. By late 1934, she returned to Brazil, her intelligence helping Vargas balance pro-Axis sympathies among his integralist supporters with pragmatic neutrality. 4 years later, in 1938, she received a more critical assignment to Paris, where she was tasked with probing invitations for Brazil to align with the Axis powers. The world had darkened further. Hitler's Anschluss annexed Austria in March 1938, and the Munich Agreement in September appeased his claims on Czechoslovakia's Sudetenland, emboldening aggression. Brazil, under Vargas's Estado Novo dictatorship declared in November 1937, a coup suspending the constitution and imposing authoritarian rule, faced pressure. Nazi Germany sought Brazilian raw materials like rubber and iron ore, offering trade deals and propaganda through the Auslands organization. Italy's Mussolini courted Vargas with cultural exchanges, while Japan eyed Pacific influence. Vargas, admiring fascist efficiency, but wary of U.S. ties, needed unbiased intel on Axis intentions. Aimé, now 35 and seasoned, was ideal. Her fashion passion provided perfect cover in Paris, the world's style capital. Equipped with an unlimited credit card from the Brazilian government, a blank check drawn on secret funds, she departed Rio, perhaps by ocean liner like the SS Normandie. Arriving in France amid spring blossoms, she settled into luxurious stays at the Plaza Athénée and Maurice hotels, immersing herself in the city's elite scene. The Plaza Athénée on Avenue Montaigne was a bastion of elegance with its red awnings, marble lobby, and views of the Eiffel Tower. Rooms featured Louis XVI furnishings, silk drapes, and balconies for discreet meetings. The Maurice, facing the Tuileries Gardens on Rue de Rivoli, boasted opulent suites once favored by royalty, its restaurant Le Maurice serving gourmet fare under crystal chandeliers. These hotels weren't just lodgings, they were hubs for international intrigue, frequented by diplomats, spies, and socialites. Aimé's days blended espionage with indulgence. Mornings at couture houses like Schiaparelli or Vionnet, fittings serving as pretext for conversations with influential patrons. Afternoons involved teas at the Ritz or walks along the Seine, ears attuned to gossip. Evenings brought galas where champagne flowed and alliances whispered. Paris at that time was a deceptive paradise, a powder keg of glamour overlaying the ominous buildup to war, with Nazi envoys subtly courting potential allies amid champagne toasts and fashion shows. The city's cafes buzzed with debates on appeasement, while the Champs-Élysées paraded Wehrmacht sympathizers. Yet, surface allure persisted. The 1937 Exposition Internationale had left Art Deco pavilions, and 1938's fashion season showcased bold designs amid political tension. As a devoted follower of haute couture, Aimée mingled effortlessly with Europe's aristocracy, the affluent trader Victor Sassoon, whose worldly tales captivated her, and Hugh Grosvenor, the second Duke of Westminster, who fell deeply under her spell. Sassoon, a Sephardic Jewish magnate from Shanghai's real estate empire, was a fixture in Paris, his stories of Asian trade revealing Axis economic strategies. Their encounters at salons might involve discussions on global markets, Aimée gleaning hints of Japanese ambitions. The Duke, one of Britain's richest men, owned vast estates and was known for his playboy lifestyle. Previous affairs with Coco Chanel and others. Meeting Aimée at a soirée, perhaps at the British Embassy, he was smitten by her exotic beauty and wit. He lavished her with extravagant gifts, including French crown jewels once belonging to Empress Eugénie, diamonds and emeralds from the 19th century imperial collection, symbols of opulence. These treasures, perhaps a tiara or necklace, were discreetly accepted, enhancing her heiress facade. She later tucked them away in Biarritz, a seaside resort where she maintained a safe house, hidden in vaults to avoid scrutiny. These opulent gestures not only enhanced her cover but also stirred envy among her acquaintances, adding unexpected personal drama to her mission. Rivals whispered of favoritism, complicating social dynamics, yet Aimée used the attention to deepen infiltrations. Amid the espionage, Aimée forged connections that added profound layers to her life. One such bond was with the iconic designer Coco Chanel, whose friendship brought both delight and complexity. Chanel, then 55, was at her peak. Her Rue Cambon boutique revolutionized fashion with little black dresses and Chanel Number Beige parfum. They met in the intimate salons of Paris, perhaps at a fitting or mutual friends gathering, sharing a mutual love for style and late-night strolls through the city's enchanting streets, discussing everything from fabrics to life's fleeting joys. Chanel, oblivious to Aimée's secret role, saw her as a kindred spirit, a glamorous outsider navigating high society. Their walks along the Seine or through Montmartre involved candid talks, Chanel sharing her rags to riches story from orphanage to empire, while Aimée offered Brazilian anecdotes, carefully omitting her spy work. This friendship drew Aimée into sparkling social whirlwinds, such as the two extravagant circus balls hosted at Villa Trianon in Versailles. Organized by American decorator Elsie de Wolfe, Lady Mendel, in 1938 and 1939. These themed galas transformed the villa, once Marie Antoinette's retreat, into a circus wonderland with tents, acrobats, and exotic animals. Guests in clown costumes or ringmaster attire included aristocracy like the Windsors and celebrities. Aimée danced under twinkling lights, her gowns adorned with jewels that whispered of her adventurous past. Some even linked to inventors like Thomas Edison from her youthful travels, perhaps brooches from American trips. She was described as so pretty and genuinely nice, carrying gaiety with her like a fan, almost overwhelmed by admirers who hung diamonds on her and shuttled her from fittings to balls. Vogue editor Bettina Ballard captured this. Aimee was lionized in Paris, her warmth and beauty making her a sensation. Yet beneath the revelry lay her true purpose. At the Hotel Maurice, she encountered Helmuth James von Moltke, a principled German lawyer and anti-Nazi resistor. Von Moltke, from the illustrious Moltke family, worked in international law, secretly opposing Hitler through the Kreisau Circle. Their meeting, perhaps arranged via mutual contacts, unfolded in a suite overlooking the Louvre. In hushed confidences, he revealed chilling details. Germany's sinister plans against Jews, the shadows of the impending Holocaust, including Kristallnacht's pogroms in November 1938, and concentration camps like Dachau. He shared documents on rearmament and Axis pacts, trusting Aimee's anti-fascist leanings. This vital intelligence, relayed back to Vargas via encrypted cables or couriers, played a role in steering Brazil toward the Allies, altering the course of South American involvement in the war. Brazil's 1942 declaration against the Axis owed partly to such reports, providing bases and resources to the U.S. Paris also blossomed with personal joys that pierced the veil of danger. In 1938, at a London embassy reception, perhaps the Brazilian or American legation, Aimee met Joseph P. Kennedy Jr., the charismatic son of the U.S. ambassador to Britain. Joe, 23, tall and athletic with Harvard Polish, was in Europe aiding his father's diplomatic efforts amid isolationist debates. Their instant connection sparked during a waltz or conversation on transatlantic ties. By February 1939, Joe journeyed to Paris, and under the ancient branches of the Cèdre Imperial in Meudon, a tree steeped in history, linked to Napoleon and Marie Antoinette, planted in 1807 and towering over the observatory grounds, they fell into a passionate romance. Meudon, a suburb with royal chateau, offered seclusion. Their rendezvous involved picnics beneath the cedar, whispers of love amid blooming gardens. Their connection was electric, stolen moments in a concealed room in Meudon, where Aimee hid sensitive documents amid whispers of love, perhaps a hidden chamber in the chateau, blending passion with peril. Joe, with his handsome features and boundless ambition, dreaming of politics like his father, mirrored her adventurous soul. He shared family stories, his brother's antics, while Aimee confided selective tales of Brazil. She even attempted to enlist him in passing information to Roosevelt, but their deepening affection complicated the espionage, blending heart and duty in ways that left lasting emotional imprints. Joe, aware of her covert role, hesitated. His father's appeasement views clashed with FDR's, yet their bond grew. As war clouds gathered, Hitler's invasion of Czechoslovakia in March 1939, and the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in August, Aimee escaped to New York in November 1939, fleeing via neutral Portugal or a transatlantic liner amid U-boat threats. Reuniting with Joe and his brothers, John, who would become JFK, Robert, and Ted, the Kennedys adored her completely, creating a lifelong bond filled with warmth and shared memories, like silly songs sung in Palm Beach. Aimee, Aimee, we all love Aimee. Ted later recalled her as a force of nature, their affection enduring through tragedies. This enduring affection highlighted her magnetic personality, drawing people into her orbit with genuine kindness, turning espionage's isolation into cherished connections. Friendships, romances, and espionage in Paris, 1938 to 1939. Amid the espionage, Aimee forged connections that added profound layers to her life. One such bond was with the iconic designer Coco Chanel, whose friendship brought both delight and complexity. They met in the intimate salons of Paris, sharing a mutual love for style and late-night strolls through the city's enchanting streets, discussing everything from fabrics to life's fleeting joys. Chanel, oblivious to Aimé's secret role, drew her into sparkling social whirlwinds, such as the two extravagant circus balls hosted at Villa Trianon in Versailles. There, Aimée danced under twinkling lights, her gowns adorned with jewels that whispered of her adventurous past. Some even linked to inventors like Thomas Edison from her youthful travels. She was described as so pretty and genuinely nice, carrying gaiety like a fan, almost overwhelmed by admirers who hung diamonds on her and shuttled her from fittings to balls. Yet beneath the revelry lay her true purpose. At the Hotel Meurice, she encountered Helmuth James von Moltke, a principled German lawyer and anti-Nazi resistor. In hushed confidences, he revealed chilling details: Germany's sinister plans against Jews, the shadows of the impending Holocaust. This vital intelligence, relayed back to Vargas, played a role in steering Brazil toward the Allies, altering the course of South American involvement in the war. Paris also blossomed with personal joys that pierced the veil of danger. In 1938, at a London embassy reception, Aimée met Joseph P. Kennedy Jr., the charismatic son of the U.S. ambassador. By February 1939, Joe journeyed to Paris and under the ancient branches of the Cèdre Imperial in Meudon, a tree steeped in history, linked to Napoleon and Marie Antoinette. They fell into a passionate romance. Their connection was electric. Stolen moments in a concealed room in Meudon, where Aimée hid sensitive documents amid whispers of love. Joe, with his handsome features and boundless ambition, mirrored her adventurous soul. She even attempted to enlist him in passing information to Roosevelt, but their deepening affection complicated the espionage, blending heart and duty in ways that left lasting emotional imprints. As war clouds gathered, Aimée escaped to New York in November 1939, reuniting with Joe and his brothers, John, who would become JFK, Robert, and Ted. The Kennedys adored her completely, creating a lifelong bond filled with warmth and shared memories. Like silly songs sung in Palm Beach, Aimée, Aimée, we all love Aimée. This enduring affection highlighted her magnetic personality, drawing people into her orbit with genuine kindness. Exile in America, World War II, and post-war family life, 1939 to 1950s. The Nazi occupation of France compelled Aimé's full emigration to the United States, where she rekindled ties with the Kennedys and adapted to a new chapter amid global turmoil. The fall of France in June 1940 was a cataclysmic event that shattered the illusions of European stability. German forces, under the Blitzkrieg strategy, had overrun the Low Countries and France in a matter of weeks, with Paris declared an open city on June 14th to avoid destruction. The armistice signed on June 22nd at Compiègne, ironically in the same railcar where Germany had surrendered in 1918, divided France into an occupied the northern zone and the collaborationist Vichy regime in the south. For Aimée, who had been operating as a Brazilian secret agent in Paris since 1938, the occupation meant immediate peril. Her cover as a fashionable socialite, mingling with aristocrats and gathering intelligence on Axis invitations to Brazil, was increasingly untenable amid Gestapo surveillance and curfews. Whispers of roundups targeting foreigners, Jews, and suspected spies filled the air, and Aimée, with her connections to anti-Nazi figures like Helmuth James von Moltke, knew she was at risk. The decision to flee was swift but fraught with danger. Many of her acquaintances, including Jewish friends in the fashion world, faced deportation to camps like Drancy. Aimé's escape route was perilous. She traveled under an assumed name, perhaps as a neutral Brazilian diplomat's aide, boarding a crowded ferry from Le Havre in late 1939, just before the full occupation clamped down. Le Havre, a key port on the English Channel, was chaotic. Refugees crammed onto vessels amid U-boat threats in the Atlantic. The crossing to neutral Portugal or directly to the U.S. was nerve-wracking, with blackouts to evade submarines and rationed food aboard. Little-known details from her later recollections reveal she carried coded messages sewn into her clothing, intelligence on German plans that she hoped to relay to Allied contacts. Arriving in New York Harbor in November 1939, she stepped onto Ellis Island, or a Manhattan dock amid the Statue of Liberty's glow, a symbol of refuge that contrasted sharply with Europe's darkness. New York was a melting pot of exiles, European intellectuals, artists, and spies flooding the city, turning places like the Waldorf Astoria into hubs of intrigue. In the U.S., Aimé quickly adapted, leveraging her pre-war connections to rebuild her life. She rekindled ties with the Kennedy family, a bond forged in Paris with Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Joe, the eldest son of U.S. Ambassador to Britain, Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., had been smitten with Aimé since their 1938 meeting at a London embassy reception. Their romance, blossoming under the Cedre Imperial in Meudon, had been electric, a whirlwind of stolen moments amid espionage. Joe's father, the ambassador, was an isolationist, sympathetic to appeasement and even admiring Hitler's efficiency. But Joe, influenced by Aimé's first-hand accounts of Nazi horrors, began shifting his views. By 1939, as detailed in rarely mentioned family letters and historical analyses, Aimé actively tried to sway Joe toward relaying her intelligence to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, complicating their love with duty. In New York, she reunited with Joe and his siblings, John, Jack, the future president, known for his charm and health struggles, Robert, Bobby, the introspective one, and young Ted, full of energy. The Kennedys, summering in Hyannisport or residing in Bronxville, embraced Aimé like family. Ted later reminisced in a 2002 Paris event about their adoration, singing the silly tune, Aimé, Aimé, we all love Aimé, composed during Palm Beach gatherings. These reunions weren't mere social calls. Aimé continued her subtle intelligence work, using her grace to influence opinion makers against Germany. New York during World War II was a city transformed. Blackout drills dimmed Times Square, rationing limited sugar and gasoline, and shipyards hummed with Liberty ship production. Aimé, perhaps renting an apartment on the Upper East Side, frequented salons with exiled Europeans like Salvador Dali or Marlene Dietrich, gathering whispers on Axis sympathizers in Latin America. Her reports to Vargas helped nudge Brazil toward the Allies. By 1942, Brazil declared war on the Axis, providing air bases in Natal for Atlantic patrols, and sending the Brazilian Expeditionary Force to Italy in 1944. Aimé's role was covert, attending fundraisers for the Free French or whispering to diplomats at the St. Regis Hotel, but impactful, swaying neutral sentiments in elite circles. Tragedy struck in 1944 when Joe perished in a covert World War II mission, his plane exploding over England in a blaze that shattered Aimé's world. Joseph P. Kennedy Jr., at 29, was a Navy lieutenant piloting experimental drones in Operation Aphrodite, a secret program converting B-24 bombers into radio-controlled flying bombs to target German V-1 sites. On August 12, 1944, Joe's PB-4Y-1 Liberator, loaded with 21,000 pounds of Torpex explosives, took off from RAF Fursfield in Suffolk. Mid-flight over the Blythe Estuary, A premature detonation, possibly from faulty wiring or electromagnetic interference, tore the plane apart, killing Joe and his co-pilot Wilford John Willie instantly. No remains were recovered. The explosion was so violent, it scattered debris over miles, leaving only a crater. The mission, classified until the 1960s, was part of desperate Allied efforts to counter Hitler's vengeance weapons amid the D-Day aftermath. Joe, decorated for patrols over the Bay of Biscay, volunteered for the hazardous duty, driven by family expectations. His father groomed him for the presidency. For Aimee, the news arrived via a telegram or Kennedy family call, a devastating blow that echoed the losses she had witnessed in Europe. She seldom spoke of the loss, burying the heartache deep within her poised exterior, yet it lingered as a poignant reminder of love cut short by war's cruelty. In private, she confided to close friends about the pain, perhaps visiting memorials or cherishing mementos like a lock of Joe's hair or letters from Paris. The Kennedy family grieved profoundly. Patriarch Joe Sr. never recovered fully, shifting ambitions to Jack. Aimee's bond with him deepened in shared sorrow, attending masses at St. Patrick's Cathedral or quiet dinners where stories of Joe's heroism brought solace. This tragedy underscored World War II's personal toll, over 400,000 American deaths, including experimental risks like Aphrodite, which claimed multiple crews before being scrapped. Through these years, she maintained her espionage subtly, using her social grace to influence key figures and contribute to the Allied cause from afar. In wartime America, intelligence networks thrived. FBI agents monitored Nazi sympathizers, while OSS, precursor to CIA, recruited exiles. Aimee, unregistered but effective, leveraged her Brazilian ties to feed info on Axis activities in South America, where German spies operated from embassies. She attended events at the Brazilian consulate in New York, charming officials into sharing rumors of U-boats off Brazil's coast. Her fashion connections proved useful. Mingling with designers like Valentina or Hattie Carnegie, she gleaned from European refugees about collaborationist circles in Vichy, France. Social grace was her weapon. At parties hosted by the Rockefellers or Astors, she disarmed guests with wit, extracting views on Lend-Lease aid or isolationism. Rarely discussed is her indirect role in cultural propaganda. She supported Brazilian artists in exile, promoting anti-fascist exhibits that subtly swayed public opinion. As the war raged, Pearl Harbor in 1941 drawing the U.S. in, battles like Midway and Normandy turning tides, Aimee adapted to rationing and blackouts, volunteering for the Red Cross or bundling care packages. Her wanderlust curbed by travel restrictions, she focused inward, perhaps taking language classes or reading voraciously on geopolitics. By 1945, with VE Day celebrations lighting Times Square and VJ Day ending the Pacific Theater, Aimee emerged resilient, her wartime experiences forging a deeper empathy and resolve. In the aftermath of the war, Aimee found stability and renewal in her second marriage to Rodman Arturo de Heeren in 1941. This union, occurring amid the war's early years, bridged her exile and post-war life, offering a haven of elegance amid uncertainty. Rodman, born August 1, 1910 in Paris, to Arturo de Heeren and Fernanda Wanamaker Munn, was a dashing heir blending Spanish nobility and American commerce. His grandfather, Antonio Heeren, was the first Count of Heeren, a title from Spanish royalty, while his maternal great-grandfather, John Wanamaker, founded the iconic Philadelphia department store in 1861, revolutionizing retail with fixed prices and money-back guarantees. Wanamaker's empire expanded to New York, amassing a fortune that funded art collections and philanthropy. Rodman, Educated in Europe, perhaps at elite schools like La Rosey in Switzerland, grew up in opulent settings, the family's Paris townhouse on Avenue Foch, and estates in Biarritz. He inherited a worldly sophistication, fluent in French, Spanish, and English, with interests in yachting and equestrian sports. By the 1930s, Rodman was a fixture in transatlantic society, attending Ascot races or Monte Carlo galas. His meeting with Aimee likely occurred in New York circles in 1940, drawn to her exotic allure and shared love of travel. Their courtship was whirlwind, dinners at Delmonico's or walks in Central Park, culminating in a quiet 1941 wedding, perhaps at St. Thomas Church on Fifth Avenue, attended by Kennedys and Wanamaker kin. Rodman brought a world of elegance and security, financial independence from trust, and a network spanning continents. Post-wedding, they navigated wartime constraints, perhaps honeymooning in Palm Beach where Rodman's family owned properties. Together, they welcomed their daughter Christina in the 1940s, a child who would inherit her mother's vibrant spirit and later establish the Fundación Cristina Girin de Arte Flamenco in Seville. Christina, born around 1945 amid war's end, grew up in a bilingual, multicultural household. Summers in Biarritz learning French, winters in New York absorbing American energy. Aimee, balancing motherhood with wanderlust, instilled in Christina a passion for arts. Family trips to Spain exposed her to flamenco's raw emotion. Little known is Christina's noble title. As Batuk Funhan Herin Thuba, she carried the family lineage. In 1993, at age 48, Christina founded the Fundación in Seville's Triana district, a nonprofit dedicated to flamenco's preservation. Housed in a historic building, it offers classes in cante, singing, baile, dance, and toque guitar, mentoring talents like Pastora Galvan. The foundation, funded by Christina's patronage and grants, hosts contests like Talento Flamenco, promoting global outreach. Flamenco, UNESCO recognized in 2010, echoes Aimee's flair, passionate, resilient bridging cultures. Christina's work honors her mother's legacy, turning personal passion into institutional impact. The family embodied post-war optimism, building a life of quiet luxury while Aimee balanced motherhood with her innate wanderlust. The late 1940s and 1950s were America's golden age: economic boom, suburban expansion, and cultural revival. The DeHerens split time between New York apartments, Palm Beach estates like Luana, purchased in the 1970s but visited earlier, and European villas. Luana, designed by Addison Misner in 1927 for Rodman's cousin Gurney Munn, featured Mediterranean revival architecture, tiled roofs, arched verandas, ocean views. Post-war, they hosted intimate gatherings, cocktails with Windsors or Fairbanks, discussions on Marshall Plan aid. Aimee's espionage days faded, replaced by philanthropy, supporting arts or refugee causes. Wanderlust persisted, transatlantic flights on Pan Am Clippers, visits to Rio reconnecting with roots. Motherhood grounded her. Christina's childhood involved ballet lessons or flamenco introductions, fostering independence. Rodman, a supportive partner, managed investments, allowing Aimee freedom. Quiet luxury defined them. Bespoke wardrobes, art collections, including Impressionists, yachts for Mediterranean cruises. Yet beneath glamour lay reflections. Joe's loss, war's scars, adding depth. This era solidified Aimee's resilience, blending Exile's lessons with family's warmth, setting the stage for her later jet-set life. The jet-set era and social prominence, 1950s to 1980s. The DeHerens came to symbolize the epitome of jet-set elegance, dividing their time among exquisite homes in Paris, New York, Palm Beach, and Biarritz. Their Palm Beach estate, Luana, a stunning gem designed by architect Addison Misner and built in 1927, served as a sanctuary for royalty and celebrities alike. Aimee hosted with effortless charm and warmth, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, enjoying cocktails on the veranda, exchanging stories of exile, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., spinning tales of Hollywood glamour, and various heads of state finding respite in her gracious company. She traveled in style, accompanied by a devoted entourage, 2 butlers, 3 maids, a cook, and a secretary. Yet she remained remarkably grounded, extending generosity to those less fortunate with quiet acts of kindness. Fashion remained her enduring armor and passion. Elected to the International Best Dressed Hall of Fame, in 1996, her impeccable wardrobe found homes in prestigious museums like the Fashion Institute of Technology and the Costume Institute in New York. In 1941, she ranked 3rd on a list of the world's best-dressed women. Her style a blend of timeless sophistication and bold flair that inspired admirers worldwide. Beneath the surface glamour, Aimee treasured simpler pleasures, moonlit walks with Chanel in post-war Paris, reminiscing about departed friends like Prince Dmitri Romanov or the Duke of Westminster, evoking a sense of nostalgic beauty. One whimsical anecdote from the 1950s captures her lighthearted nature. At a lively party, she mistakenly confused Prince Dmitri Romanov with Felix Yusupov, the infamous slayer of Rasputin. Yusupov stormed off in indignation, but Aimee's infectious laughter diffused the awkwardness, turning the moment into a fond memory. Another cherished detail involved the Duke's lavish gifts, including those crown jewels, which she contemplated donating to a Biarritz museum after a thoughtful conversation about style's legacy. She viewed them as inspirational lessons for younger generations, a direct echo of Belle's advice on staying youthful through connections. Twilight Years and Graceful Aging, 1980s to 2006. Aimee's later years were a testament to graceful aging and unyielding vitality. Rodman's passing in 1983 left her a widow at around 80, a profound loss that tested her resilience, yet she forged ahead with determination. In 2004, at the remarkable age of 101, she sold Luana for $15 million, a poignant goodbye to a home brimming with decades of memories, laughter-filled gatherings, quiet reflections, and the echoes of illustrious guests. Astonishingly, at 102 in 2005, she journeyed to Belgrade for Crown Prince Alexander of Yugoslavia's 60th birthday at the majestic White Palace, mingling with royalty as effortlessly as in her youth, defying time's constraints. That same year, she embraced the digital age by enrolling in online courses at Crèmerie de Paris, contributing to the development of the Brazilian White Pages, an innovative digital directory that connected people across her homeland. In quiet confidences, she shared treasures from her past. I have so many souvenirs of Coco Chanel, At that time, we were still so young, she was just unbelievable. These reflections encapsulated her thoughtful spirit, a blend of nostalgia and forward thinking that kept her engaged until the end. Aimee's legacy extends far beyond her personal story, creating ripples that continue to influence the world. Her espionage efforts likely contributed to Brazil's 1942 declaration of war against the Axis, providing crucial resources and bases to the Allies, and reshaping Latin America's role in World War II, with lasting effects on post-war geopolitics. Culturally, she became a symbol of timeless elegance, her best-dressed honors inspiring countless individuals to view style as an art form that transcends eras. Through Christina's Flamenco Foundation, Aimé's love for passionate expression endures, fostering cultural bridges that unite diverse traditions. Her ties to the Kennedys exemplified how personal relationships can forge transatlantic diplomacy, with fond recollections illustrating the power of human connections in shaping global events. What lessons does Aimee impart? She embodies resilience, enduring the devastating loss of a love like Joe, outliving multiple eras of upheaval, yet welcoming novelty, such as internet pursuits at 102. She illuminates life's fragile beauty, surface glamour often concealing inner pain, boundless curiosity triumphing over age's limitations. In an age of transient celebrity, her century-long saga encourages us to gather friends, pursue bold adventures, and safeguard our deepest secrets. Aimee departed on September 13, 2006 in Manhattan at the age of 103, finding eternal rest in Palm Beach amid the swaying palms she cherished. She departed a world enriched by her vibrant spark, a gentle reminder that one woman's subtle whisper can resonate through the annals of history. Thank you for joining this exploration. May Aimee's essence kindle your own hidden stories.